Windows 9X is a generic term referring to a series of Microsoft Windows computer operating systems produced from 1995 to 2000, which were based on the Windows 95 kernel and its underlying foundation of MS-DOS, both of which were updated in subsequent versions. This includes all versions of Windows 95, Windows 98, and Windows ME. Windows 9X is predominantly known for its use in desktops. In 1998, Windows made up 82% of operating system market share. Internal release versions for versions of Windows 9X are 4X. Previous MS-DOS-based versions of Windows used version numbers of 3.2 or lower. Windows NT, which was aimed at professional users such as networks and businesses, used a similar but separate version number between 3.1 and 4.0. The final version of Windows 9X was Windows ME, released in September 2000 with an internal version number of 4.9. All future versions of Windows, starting with Windows 2000 and Windows XP, would be based on the Windows NT codebase. History. Windows prior to 95. The first independent version of Microsoft Windows, version 1.0, released on the 20th of November 1985, achieved little popularity. It was originally going to be called Interface Manager, but Roland Hansen, the head of marketing at Microsoft, convinced the company that the name Windows would be more appealing to consumers. Windows 1.0 was not a complete operating system, but rather an operating environment that extended MS-DOS, and shared the latter's inherent flaws and problems. The second release of Microsoft Windows, version 2.0, came out on the 9th of December 1987, and used the real mode memory model, which confined it to a maximum of 1 megabyte of memory. In such a configuration, it could run under another multitasking system like DeskView, which used the 286 protected mode. Microsoft Windows scored a significant success with Windows 3.0, released in 1990. In addition to improved capabilities given to native applications, Windows also allowed users to better multitask older MS-DOS-based software compared to Windows 386, thanks to the introduction of virtual memory. Microsoft developed Windows 3.1, which included several minor improvements to Windows 3.0, but primarily consisted of bug fixes and multimedia support. It also excluded support for real mode, and only ran on an 80286 or better processor. Later Microsoft also released Windows 3.11, a touch-up to Windows 3.1 which included all of the patches and updates that followed the release of Windows 3.1 in 1992. Meanwhile, Microsoft continued to develop Windows NT. The main architect of the system was Dave Cutler, one of the chief architects of EMS at Digital Equipment Corporation. Microsoft hired him in August 1988 to create a successor to OS/2, but Cutler created a completely new system instead. Microsoft announced at the conference its intentions to develop a successor to both Windows NT and Windows 3.1's replacement, which would unify the two into one operating system. This successor was code-named Cairo. In hindsight, Cairo was a much more difficult project than Microsoft had anticipated, and, as a result, NT and Chicago would not be unified until Windows XP. Windows 95. After Windows 3.11, Microsoft began to develop a new consumer-oriented version of the operating system code-named Chicago. Chicago was designed to have support for 32-bit preemptive multitasking like OS/2 and Windows NT, although a 16-bit kernel would remain for the sake of backward compatibility. The Win32 API, first introduced with Windows NT, was adopted as the standard 32-bit programming interface, with Win16 compatibility being preserved through a technique known as thunking. A new GUI was not originally planned as part of the release. Although elements of the Cairo user interface were borrowed and added as other aspects of the release slipped, Microsoft did not change all of the Windows code to 32-bit. Parts of it remained 16-bit for reasons of compatibility, performance and development time. Additionally, it was necessary to carry over design decisions from earlier versions of Windows for reasons of backwards compatibility, even if these design decisions no longer matched a more modern computing environment. These factors immediately began to impact the operating system's efficiency and stability. Microsoft marketing adopted Windows 95 as the product name for Chicago when it was released on August 24, 1995. Microsoft went on to release 5 different versions of Windows 95. Windows 95 Original Release. Windows 95A included Windows 95 OS R1 slipstreamed into the installation. Windows 95B included several major enhancements: Internet Explorer 3.0 and full FAT32 file system support. Windows 95B USB included basic USB support. Windows 95C included all the above features, plus IE 4.0. This was the last 95 version produced. OSR2, OSR 2.1 and OSR 2.5 were not released to the general public, rather, they were available only to OEMs that would preload the OS onto computers. Some companies sold new hard drives with OSR2 pre-installed. The first Microsoft Plus add-on pack was sold for Windows 95. Windows 98. On the 25th of June 1998, Microsoft released Windows 98. It included new hardware drivers and better support for the FAT32 file system, which allows support for disk partitions larger than the 2 GB maximum accepted by Windows 95. The USB support in Windows 98 is more robust than the basic support provided by the OEM editions of Windows 95. It also controversially integrated the Internet Explorer browser into the Windows GUI and Windows Explorer File Manager. In 1999, Microsoft released Windows 98 Second Edition, an interim release whose notable features were the addition of Internet connection sharing and improved WDM audio and modem support. Internet connection sharing is a form of network address translation, allowing several machines on a LAN to share a single Internet connection. Windows 98 Second Edition has certain improvements over the original release. Hardware support through device drivers was increased. Many minor problems present in the original Windows 98 were found and fixed, which make it, according to many, the most stable release of Windows 9X family, to the extent that commentators used to say that Windows 98's beta version was more stable than Windows 95's final version. Windows Me. In September 2000, Microsoft introduced Windows Me, which upgraded Windows 98 with enhanced multimedia and Internet features. It also introduced the first version of System Restore, which allowed users to revert their system state to a previous, known good point in the case of system failure. The first version of Windows Movie Maker was introduced as well. Windows Me was conceived as a quick one-year project that served as a stopgap release between Windows 98 and Windows XP. Many of the new features were available from the Windows Update site as updates for older Windows versions. As a result, Windows Me was not acknowledged as a distinct operating system along the lines of 95 or 98, and is often included in the Windows 9X series. Windows Me was criticized by users for its instability and unreliability, due to frequent freezes and crashes. A PC World article dubbed Windows Me the Mistake Edition, and placed it fourth in their worst tech products of all time feature. The inability of users to easily boot into real mode 16-bit MS-DOS mode, as in Windows 95 and 98, led users to quickly learn how to hack their Windows Me installations to provide the needed service. decline. The release of Windows 2000 marked a shift in the user experience between the Windows 9X series and the Windows NT series, where NT4 suffered from a lack of USB support, plug-and-play support, and no support for DirectX, preventing users to play contemporary games on Windows NT4. Windows 2000 had a modern interface and better USB and plug-and-play support than any version of Windows 9X. The release of Windows XP signaled a change of direction for Microsoft, bringing the consumer and business operating systems together. One by one, support for the Windows 9X series ended, and Microsoft stopped selling the software to end users, then later to OEMs. By March 2004, it was impossible to purchase any copy of any Windows in the 9X series. End of service life. Microsoft continued to support the use of the Windows 9X series until July 11, 2006, when extended support ended for Windows 98, Windows 98 Second Edition, and Windows Millennium Edition. Microsoft DirectX, a set of standard gaming APIs, stopped being updated on Windows 95 at version 8.0a. The last version of DirectX supported for Windows 98, ME, 2000 and XP is 9.0c. DirectX 10 shipped with Windows Vista, although it can be upgraded to DirectX 11 via Service Pack 2 and the platform update. DirectX 11 shipped with Windows 7, and DirectX 11.1 shipped with Windows 8. Previous versions of Windows are not able to officially run DirectX 10 and DirectX 11 exclusive applications. Support for Microsoft Internet Explorer also ended with Windows 9X. The last version of Internet Explorer for Windows 95 is Internet Explorer 5.5. Internet Explorer 6 with Service Pack 1 was the last version to which the browser could be upgraded in Windows 98 and ME. Microsoft Internet Explorer 7, the first major update to Internet Explorer 6 in half a decade, was only available for Windows XP SP2 and Windows Vista. The growing number of important updates caused by the end of service life of these pieces of software have slowly made Windows 9X less and less practical for everyday use. Today, even open-source projects such as Mozilla will not run on Windows 9X without rework.